Voting, the ultimate form of United States democracy. Many would argue voting is one of the most important things we can do as a U.S. citizen. Whether you choose to vote red, blue, or somewhere in the middle, the most important thing is that you let your voice be heard. Easy, right? For some, that's not always the case. Young people are one of the lowest demographics to turn out to the polls in any election, presidential or midterm. Time magazine reported in the 2014 midterm election, 19.9% of adults under 30 voted, which was the lowest rate of youth turnout recorded in the past 40 years, according to the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement. However, the times are a-changin'. In an article from The Atlantic, published just a few days before the midterm election, indicated that preliminary results from ABC exit polls suggest that voters 18 to 29 would make up 13% of the overall electorate in this year's midterms, which would be an 11% increase from 2014. Senior New Tech High School government student and first-time voter, Caitlin Schneider might know why that number is increasing.
Each time we put a vote in, it's showing what we say we want to see change in the state of South Dakota. And the more that we voice, the more change that will happen. And even if it's not a vote, it's something else that you care about, you should still make that change and make that impact, because it'll all impact the state of South Dakota in a different way, or even nationally.
It's no secret that over the years, voter turnout among the younger generation has been sparse, and there could be many reasons for that. Maybe it's because they don't feel like their voice truly counts. Maybe they don't like the candidates, or maybe their parents don't like the candidates. Maybe they were never taught how to vote, or maybe they just don't care. We could go down the road of maybes, but maybe, just maybe, young voters don't turn out to the polls because they're overwhelmed with information and they don't even know where to start. That's why New Tech High School government teacher Scott Sorensen put a special emphasis on this year's midterm election with his students.
The primary purpose is students nowadays, especially in the age of social media, are inundated with tons of information from candidates, from lobbyists, from big money. They hear all this all the time from different sources, and they need to be able to learn how to take that information and pull out what's most important, especially in an election like this where you have all these candidates. The majority of what they know without research is what they see on TV and online. So ultimately, a lot of people might show up to the ballot booth and choose based on who had the best commercial, or who had the best yard signs, or the most yard signs, or who had the best attack ads. So the goal behind this whole thing is for them to look into it and see, okay, I hear what this is about from TV, but what does it actually look like? I hear that this candidate wants to do this, but what is their background, or who are they associated with, or who's financing their campaign? To try to dig deeper than just, it's November 6th, time to go to the ballot box, I like R's, or I like D's, or whatever it is, to try to go a little deeper than your average voter probably does.
On November 5th, just a day before the midterm election, Scott Sorensen's government classes gathered into the cafeteria to host a pre-election event where they informed students, staff, and the community members on the South Dakota gubernatorial and United States House candidates, as well as the 5 ballot questions.
The purpose of what we're doing today is to inform the voters. We want the voters to go into the polling places to be informed about what they're voting on, because that way they go in and they make an informed decision, and they know what they're voting for and what they want to see change in the state of South Dakota. So we created our presentations to be informative, not have a biased opinion. We wanted them to make their own opinion based off of the information that we gave them.
New Tech High government students spent the semester learning with their fellow classmates about the candidates and the issues at hand in detail. They were equally informed on Republican and Democrat candidates, as well as all things at stake with the proposed amendments. They had classroom discussions with one another about the pros and cons of each candidate and issues outside of what the public heard on commercials and saw on social media. They then used their learned knowledge to pass along to their peers and community members without any intention to persuade. Mr. Sorensen and the government students hoped that by doing this, more people would be able to walk into the polls being well prepared to make an informed vote.
I will tell you, this generation is far more progressive than my generation and my parents. They're far more open to outside ideas. But I love that they feel free to share, to give their opinions. And they do it in a respectful environment, which is, it's a big part of the project-based learning environment, is sharing, being open to other people's ideas, trying to find middle ground.
While we don't know the exact number of young voters who turned out on Election Day this 2018 midterm, we do know one thing. Young people have a voice, and they're not going to sit by and let it go unheard anymore.
I believe it's important to vote because we all have an opinion, and my generation has a tendency to, if something goes wrong, we start to complain. But if we vote the way we would like to vote, then we wouldn't have that issue. And there's a lot of us where we can swing the vote if we would just go out and vote. And that's something that we need to do, and that we need to start teaching our generation to do, because it's important for us to do.
If you look at elections, there's some elections where someone wins by millions, sometimes someone wins by a few. You never know what it's going to be. And I always tell them too, voting is the first step. Okay? You register to vote, you go out and vote. That's step one. If you really want to see change, that's where knocking on doors, getting involved in the community, maybe thinking about someday even running for a campaign, working for a campaign, finding out what your principles are, finding out what you support, and going beyond the first Tuesday in November and kind of living that through your whole year. And if some of them take that away from this, then mission accomplished.
Many of the New Tech High government students are not 18 yet and were not able to participate in the midterm election. But when we asked Mr. Sorensen if he thought this process of taking more time to get his students invested in candidates and issues and better prepare them to make an informed vote when they do head into that polling booth, his response was,
I hope so. I try to, be realistic. This isn't going to turn everybody into what I would hope to be lifelong voters. There's always going to be a certain percentage that don't. But I definitely, when I get that feedback from them that's saying, oh, I wish I could vote this year, but I can't, that to me tells me I'm heading them in the right direction. Because one of my biggest goals as a government teacher, besides teaching them the content, how government works, is to get them excited to be a voter, to participate. They don't to let them know. I had a student a couple years ago who just couldn't, she's like, why do we have to take government? The other day she came up and said, she's like, I think I want to be mayor someday. And whether that happens or not, I have no idea, but just planting the seed of my vote counts. I don't have to just let the people with money and the power and the big voices control me. I do have an outlet. And I feel like I'm playing a part in that with what we're seeing in society right now, with the movements happening, the groundswells in this country. I'm hoping that they'll see that, your everyday 18-year-old in South Dakota can actually make a difference.